Hello again, my fellow nerds. It is I, Amanda, and I am back to talk to you again, very belatedly at this point, super belatedly, in fact, about a comic that I read that actually surprised me. It surprised me quite a bit. This is a comic that I initially was kind of the least interested in from the initial From the Ashes line and from especially the main X books, but through hearing more about it, especially at SDCC, where the creatives on the panel all pretty much confessed that this book was actually their favorite comic in this line amongst them, I became quite curious. When it launched, I didn't know what to expect, and after reading it, I gotta say, I'm kind of flabbergasted. Why? Well, I'll tell you more about my feelings and where I think they're coming from as we get more into this review. First things first, spoilers ahead, although really this story is more enjoyable for how it unfolds, and I think the dialogue and inner monologue and the interactions in both issues, I think then the story beats themselves. There is nothing too shocking in terms of the events of what happens here in these pages. It's more the way that everything plays out that makes this issue so intriguing. Still, I'm going to be talking about plot points and character development and all that good stuff, so you've been warned, spoilers ahead. Exceptional X-Men issue number 1 is written by Eve Ewing, no relation to Al Ewing, by the way, in case you were wondering, with art by Carmen Carnero. Colors are by Nolan Woodard, letters by VC's Joe Sabino, cover art by Carmen Carnero and Nolan Woodard, and many variants by other artists. If you are so inclined to check those out, highly recommend doing so. Myself, I stuck with the standard cover for this one. Design in here is by Jay Bowen, assistant editor Martin Biro, associate editor Annalise Bisa, editor and conductor of X, Tom Brevoort, editor-in-chief C.B. Cebulski. X-Men, of course, created by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee. Let's begin with what exactly happens in issue number 1. Although this is going to be a review of both issues, issue 1 is really where a lot of the vibes for me lived. A brief synopsis, if you will. The issue starts off with Kate working as a bartender at a local restaurant. She is dealing with a pretty wild brunch rush and ends up being forced to take a break because she is deemed to be doing too much and working just too darn hard. It's in this brief moment of quiet that we get a sense that not all is well with Kate and that she is going through some stuff. Namely, she seems to be dealing with bouts of anxiety and depression related to everything she sacrificed and lost during the fall of Krakoa, and also as a result of the extremes she was driven to during her time as Shadowcat. At this point, Kate no longer wants to be a superhero and is basically trying to distance herself as much from her past and from her fellow mutants as humanly possible, or mutantly possible, taking advantage of the fact that she can more easily blend in since of course her mutation isn't physical. However, that isn't to say that it doesn't bother her knowing there are other mutants out there, more visible mutants, who are suffering and struggling during this time. She just can't turn that off. In this issue, we are introduced to Kate's roommate, Pryde, and we also are taken along on a night out where Kate is on her way to meet up with a date who she is attending a concert with. Unfortunately, it turns out that Kate may have been stood up. However, she soon realizes that she simply just got the date of the concert wrong. Whoops. Turns out her night wasn't wasted, however, as the current concert that is playing at the venue is attracting a younger crowd. A young mutant girl gets caught up in some trouble, and while initially Kate tries to turn away from this, she undoubtedly gets pulled into the conflict in order to save the girl from some trigger-happy concert venue security. After saving the young girl, she later finds out her name is Trista, and after connecting with her, chooses to introduce herself as Kitty, a clear sign that Kitty may start to be feeling differently about her undeniable connection and history with her fellow mutants and the X-Men. The next day, Trista delivers a gift to Kitty as a thank you for saving her the night before, and with the attached note refers to Kitty as her hero. Super cute. Kitty, mood somewhat elated, heads to work where she feels a pain in her head. A pain that would only ever answer to the name of Emma Frost. Dun dun dun. One of my favorite things in this comic was seeing the relationship between Kate and her roommate Pryde. It felt very real to me, honestly. It reminded me of very much of the days when I first moved out and moved to, the big city with my friends. I moved in with 2 of my best friends when I first moved to the city, and we were very lucky to have found a spacious multi-level apartment above a sort of a retail space or a restaurant space it ended up being. Though also thanks to our devoted commitment to find the best place, honestly. I mean, it wasn't all all luck. I remember us rotating in and out of the apartment, and it was just always fun when we'd run into one another or actually have a night when we were all home and we could just all hang out and schedule a hangout together. I remember when one of us was spiraling and, not mentally doing great, and how we would just be there for one another to boost each other up, like how Pryde does with Kate in this issue, noticing Kate's depression and calling her out, and then offering to jokingly pour ice water on her in an attempt to help her friend get out of her funk. This really helped to ground me in the issue and made the experience here feel more real because I could connect with it on a personal level. This might not work for everyone, as I'm not sure everyone has had the experience of, what it's like to live with best friends in a big city, but for me, this really worked. And I can say, as someone who has had this experience personally, this felt very accurate, which also I think is a compliment to the dialogue here. This comic claims to be one that is officially establishing Kitty as a bisexual character, another bi babe. And to its credit, it definitely comes up in this issue, though in not quite as flamboyant and overt a way as I was initially expecting, just based on how boldly they were declaring, like, this comic is going to be the one where we establish this. Remember when I said Kitty has a concert date in this issue? Yeah, it's there that it's established that her date is actually with a woman when Kate uses she, her pronouns to describe the person that she's intending to meet here. Kate thinks she is being stood up initially, and panicking, she asks herself, should I text her? However, I feel it is a little unfair to call this the first comic that establishes Kate's queerness, as I feel it's been alluded to multiple times prior to this comic, to be honest with you. One of the more recent and more definite, in my opinion, examples of this happened in one of my favorite Krakoan era comics, Marauders Volume Number 1. In this series, back in issue number 2, Kate and her crew go to get tattoos. It's here she gets her famous hold fast knuckle tattoos, a whole look that I've wanted to cosplay for such a long time. And it's here that she kisses a male tattoo artist during her visit. But then again, in issue number 12, after her death and her resurrection, Kate once again goes to get new knuckle tattoos because she's been resurrected, so she doesn't have any now. Just having been reborn as a clean slate, she gets Kill Shaw tattooed on her knuckles, planning, of course, her revenge on Shaw, who killed her. This time, she encounters a female tattoo artist who looks a bit like magic, in my opinion. And Kate also kisses the female artist as well. Bisexual. This was especially exciting for me, as I have also secretly shipped Magic and Kate together for a while, though I'm also fine with them just being besties, but I do think they would make a cute couple if, we wanted to explore a romance between the two of them. So Marvel, if you're open, I am as well. Overall, we're seeing a major shift in Kate's character in this issue, and this was something I was initially apprehensive about. Not in regards to the queer stuff, as I said, I feel like that's already been established and alluded to throughout Kate's more recent history. I was more nervous about the return to her more classic name of Kitty Pryde. It just felt like this was a sign we were returning back to ones, erasing potentially all of the character development of the past era to put the toys back on the shelf. Something I have been wary and nervous about with much of the From the Ashes comics and their depictions of characters and their stories. However, while this comic is somewhat doing that, it feels like it has one of the best approaches I have yet to see in this line when it comes to resetting a character. Because it isn't really resetting Kitty at all. It's just following her natural progression to, in essence, kind of bring her full circle. It isn't actually erasing any of her past, but is more dealing with said past, addressing it, and allowing it to affect Kate and evolve her as a character, which of course brings her back to Kitty. Kate is dealing with depression and anxiety as a direct result of the awful stuff she was forced to do out of desperation during the Fall of X era. Her depression not only comes from her deeds, but from some amount of regret, I think, as despite everything her and her fellow mutants fought for, despite all their sacrifices, it didn't matter. They still ultimately lost. Krakoa and the days of living in its paradise are lost to mutants now. They fought and it was all seemingly for naught. Of course, she'd be depressed after all of that. Of course, she'd want to distance herself from mutants and the X-Men. It's simply put too painful for Kate to be around at this time. However, with Kate meeting Trista later in this issue and saving her, Kate is reminded of there being a reason to fight in the world, of there being hope in the next generation, of how she used to represent that hope as one of the younger X-Men, which is why she chooses to reclaim her old name and introduce herself to Trista as Kitty, I think. It all makes perfect sense and shows a lot of consideration for where Kitty has been and what she would be going through emotionally at this time. I found the approach to Kitty's character here to be quite endearing, honestly. As a Kitty fan, I feel like Eve clearly gets it. But the writing isn't all that I liked in this issue. I'm also a big fan of the art here as well. I really love how expressive the faces are and the cleanness of the lines here. There is a certain shine to the art here, but what really stands out for me is the facial expressions. I especially like when we get close-ups on Trista's face, who as a teenager, and also just based on what happens to her in this issue, has such an intense range of emotion that she just goes through from page to page. In fact, Trista also stood out to me. I just loved her discussion after getting home with her grandmother after Kitty drops Trista off. Trista's grandmother is just still up and she notices that something is wrong with her granddaughter. When she asks Trista about it, Trista responds by just bursting out into tears. Trista's grandmother gives Trista a big hug, saying, "I see all those things they say about your kind of people. Terrible. Now, you listen to me. You come from strong people. You hear me?" And Trista's response to this just about broke me. It was something I really felt for my child self, but also really felt for other children and people just out in the world today. "But Grandma, I don't want to be strong. I just want to be myself." Sheesh. Sheesh, I just want to be myself too, Trista. It's always heartbreaking when I'm confronted with the reality that there are just so many kids out there today who feel that they have to fight just to be who they are. This part was definitely reflecting some real world issues and stuff for me, so it really hit me hard. While this issue was light on the side of Emma Frost, I did enjoy her cameo and her introduction to the series at the end of the issue, and I love that she just gives Kitty a literal headache. It's so fitting for their relationship. It's so funny. Very eager to see what Emma has up her sleeve and see how she brings Kitty back into the fold, because I think that's where we're going with this one. This was also one of the first issues that I read to not have a QR code at the end, and I thought to myself, is this the end of QR codes? I hope so. And seriously, I haven't seen one since, so thank goodness. The death of QR codes. That was a weird time that we lived through, but hey, it was a thing that happened. I also read Exceptional X-Men issue number 2, this one right here, but this one had less to say about, so I figured I would just include this in my review here and make it a 1 and 2 review. So Exceptional X-Men issue number 2 credits are the same as issue 1, but letters change from Sabino to VC's Travis Lanham. Now to start, this issue felt a bit more predictable. Kate is finally going for her date, the one that she totally messed the day up for in issue number 1, and in this issue she's enjoying that her date Nina is not connected to her mutant history or past at all. Going to a soccer game to watch Nina's niece play. Super cute, super low-key. While they talk over the game, however, a fight breaks out in the stands after a mutant kid is harassed and declines help from one of the players on Nina's niece's team. However, the girl, Tao, refuses to let this slide and forcibly gets involved, attempting to stop the bullying to the embarrassment of the mutant being harassed, who we find out is named Alex. The thing I like about this altercation is that it forces Kate to get involved, unable to let herself stay out of it. Ultimately, this series is reminding both of us and Kate that she is a mentor and a teacher at heart, whether or not she wants to be, and a person who deeply cares for her fellow mutants, despite all the pain that side of her life has caused her, and how much it's forced her to do some truly awful things in defense of mutant kind. Kate ends up diffusing the situation, and when Tao storms off angrily, hot-headed, and wanting to continue the fight, she gets stuck in a beam. Yeah, it turns out Tao can phase. Kate then mentors her on how to get out. Something I love about Tao's character, honestly, is that she shares Kate's power set. I just feel like, yeah, how can Kate not mentor this person? You know what I mean? How can she avoid that? It's gonna happen. After this, Kate's date is wrapped up early as the disruption has forced the soccer game to end early, and Nina has to drive her niece home. Tao ends up texting Kate to apologize later on, having gotten her number from Nina's niece. Kate sees a prime opportunity, of course, to connect Tao with another young mutant who has been pestering her, Trista from issue number 1, who's still reaching out to Kate for guidance. And in the end, Tao, Alex, and Trista all meet up to connect. We also learn that Alex has a really interesting power set that involves those nearby apparently spouting out any emotional baggage or feelings they might have on their mind while in his vicinity. Definitely a unique psionic power set, it would seem. I really think there's a lot of potential for us to find interesting ways to write both Alex and the use of his powers in this comic. I cannot wait to see what Eve Ewing does with them, honestly. The art here, by the way, is solid throughout, and while the idea behind this issue, the harassment at the soccer game between teenagers, which forces Kate to get involved, felt kind of typical and kind of predictable, the way it was ultimately handled, and some of these characters make it not so predictable and not so typical. The art and the layout here also are solid throughout the issue as well. I'm still really enjoying the artwork, especially the facial expressions, and I'll add I like a lot of style choices here for what our characters are wearing. The outfit Kate wears at the beginning when she leaves work to head to her daytime date, although really who lives in New York City and owns a car as a server? Is that realistic? Is that a thing? And the outfits the kids wear during their meetup together near the end of the issue are particularly great and are some of my favorites. Speaking of, during the meetup, the three decide to go and ambush Kate, wanting to spend time with their new self-adopted mentor. Kate, however, attempts to get them all to leave as they knock on her door. Tao even threatens to phase through her door, and I love how Kate responds to this, by the way. That would be B&E. Also, no shade, but can you? Brilliantly written in Kate's tone. However, as Kitty thinks about her own mentor and friend Storm, her heart softens somewhat and she decides to at least open the door to confront the young mutants, which is when we see Emma has stepped in, taken hold of their minds, and is marching them away down the stairs of the apartment building, promising to Kate, "I'll see to it that these young people get exactly what they need." Much to Kate's horror and frustration. Also, yes, I read Emma with a British accent. I know that she's technically from America, but I just think Emma would give herself a British accent because she has that kind of power, and why not? She just strikes me as a lady that sounds British, you know what I mean? I know she's not from there, though. Overall, I would give Exceptional X-Men issue number 1 a 5 out of 5. It really surprised me how much I was able to connect to it and how much of a service it did Kitty as a character. I was nervous about her returning to her more classic name, but given the context provided in the issue, I ultimately think it makes a lot of sense and even agree with the decision. Although I'll still miss her using Kate, though. Those were some good times. Though clearly we're not getting rid of it immediately across the board or anything like that, as she's still using the name Kate in issue number 2. So probably we're going to come back to it slowly. For issue number 2, I'd give it a 4 out of 5, still quite enjoyable, but not as good as issue number 1. I like the cliffhanger ending and ultimately the relationships that we're building here. The young mutants are also super interesting to me, so I'm looking forward to seeing where this story takes them, but I will say this issue felt more familiar in terms of X-Men comics in a way that, while comforting, also felt a bit too safe. That said, I'm still very interested to see where we go next with issue number 3, and where this comic takes one of my favorite mutant characters next. Also, I cannot wait to see what Eve Ewing and Carmen Carnero do with Emma. Let me know your thoughts on this issue in the comments below. How does this comic rank for you so far among the other From the Ashes comics? I want to know. I'll see you in the comments, but until then, you stay nerdy, YouTube.